Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Study Jams, session 2. It's great to have all of you here again. Looking forward to a great session as we move ahead. And also would like to wish all of you a very happy Republic Day. Hope you've been having a good holiday. Right. Before I get started with the session, I realized I did something I'd call a stupid mistake. I was so excited to get started off with the session yesterday. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Manab Kumar Biswas, and I'm currently in my fourth semester doing computer science in the PAS EC campus. And I'm also a Microsoft Learn student ambassador, as well as I'm a part of the ACM club here at the campus. Um, I generally, except for like college, I maybe play piano some of the other times, and I also play a little bit of drums. So that's about me. I know you guys, I mean, all of you would remember me as a person who didn't give an intro to a session. So I'm going to cover that up by saying that I thought I'll find an interesting way for all of you to remember me. So I did this, but actually, no, I just forgot to introduce myself. Yeah, right. Getting started with the session, I would share my screen. Give me a minute, please. All right, I guess all of you can see my screen. So pulling up the PPT. Okay, great. Where we stopped yesterday was about the structure of Android Studio. I'm going to take a little bit of a retour of what we did yesterday. So I started off with Kotlin concepts, got all of you introduced to variables, different types of functions, different data types, and classes, and of course classes and functions, I'm repeating them again because we would be using them extensively. Followed by that, we went on to looking up the structure of Android application, the entire structure of Android Studio when you open up a new, say, project. And so I'm gonna, revise that a little bit by opening up Android Studio in a couple of minutes. Right. So where we are at now is, yep, as you see, you've done both of these. So that's great progress. Congrats, all of you. Right, now we're going to be starting on with building our first Android app. That's pretty cool, right? I mean, what I would like all of you to do is, if possible, you could, open up Android Studio side by side. And as I show you, you could probably, build the app together. Or if that's not something that you'd like, you can, of course, look into the video right after the session and do it again. But yeah, totally up to you how you all would like to progress. Right. So our first app is going to be pretty simple, but pretty cool at the same time because you can see it running either on your phone or on your Android virtual device, as I mentioned yesterday. Also, I forgot to mention that if you run it on your phone, you would have to have something called developer options turned on. So what you do is you go into your settings and you probably find about phone, something like that. And then you click on probably one of your software versions a couple of times, and then it'll keep on showing you small messages in the bottom, which we call toasts. So it's going to be showing you that you're 3 steps away from becoming a developer, as many times as you keep clicking. And once you're a developer, you go into that and you enable developer options, and that allows you to run your app on your smartphone. Or either ways, you can run it on an Android virtual device, right? And also, please keep on asking any questions you all might have in the chat. And I'll again answer them in the break that we have. And again, any questions after that, I'll try to answer them at the end of the session. But feel free to ask questions at any point of time. Right. So our first app is gonna be about. It's pretty simple, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have only one screen in the app, which, if you remember, I referred to it as an activity. So we're gonna have only one activity, in which we'll have a text display, which we call the text view, and we'll have a button. So when you click on the button, so you click it for the first time, what the text that was displayed as well as the text on the button would change. And then if you click it again, it's going to revert back to what it was, right? So again, you notice here that we say we'll be using a constraint layout to group the views together. So I'll come to all of that once I open up Android Studio. Right. So what you all might want to do is open up Android Studio. I'm going to open up the project that I created yesterday to show you all the project structure, which was called this, right? If you're opening a project for the first time, you would have to follow those couple of prompts that come up to you. And again, it'll take a little while for the Gradle sync, take place. Right, now close all of these files. Right, so just a quick revision of what the Android app structure looks like, right? First, okay, let me quickly close out this. So this is your Android view where you would see different folders of your Android app grouped together by Android Studio. Right, so once you click on your app, here are your main folders that you will be interacting with. Right, when you click on manifest, you see your Android manifest file. That's something that I said would be the the configurations of installation in your device. So say when your app installs in your device, you would have your app name, your app icon, your app theme. What happens when you first open your app, right? This is an XML file. So what happens in an XML file is you define your own tags. If you all are familiar with HTML, you would know that you have predefined tags in HTML, whereas here you would see it's a pretty similar kind of syntax. But what you would do is you have your own tags, and then own tags in the sense like you would see manifest, application. Those are all of the tags that you create in XML here. So this is your entire application that opens up, and this is the first activity again, which is the first screen that opens up. So that's your first screen that opens up when your app is opened, and all of those details that you would require when you install your app or your APK for the first time on your device. That's in the manifest, which is again produced by Android Studio by itself. Okay, closing that up. Now we have our Java folder where we have three other folders again. The first one being where you would have all your Kotlin files. So that's what we call main activity, right? That's typically where all the business logic, as I mentioned yesterday, for our app would be written. In the sense, it's called business logic because you write it down yourself, and that determines how efficient or how, say you have two similar kind of apps. So except for providing a better UI, the only thing you can differentiate between another app would be to provide, say, an efficient or a faster logic, right? So this is what you write on your own. Everything that happens in your activity gets noted down here. I'm going to come to all the specifications or whatever you see on the screen soon enough. The next folder that you would have is for Android. And the next two folders are for Android tests. So the first one is for something you called an instrumented test. Now, this test tests, say, the entire functionality of your app. So this would run on your Android virtual device, right? You can see an example of a test created. So say all of you open up a new project, you would get this by default, provided you select empty activity. Of course, you will get with the others as well, but this is what I have selected. So uh, you would see this is an example of an instrumented test. Again, you have buttons here that would help you run it. I would come to testing a little bit later into the session, right? Next kind of test that we have in our folder is called a unit test, which is basically to test a particular function within our code. If you remember, I probably ran this function yesterday. So this runs on something you call a JVM, which is a Java virtual machine. Okay, that's all you should know about tests at the moment. Now we have our next most important folder called the resources folder, where you would have all kind of resources that you would need to, I would say, build layouts, build your app's UI, add themes, add font styles, colors, all of that, right? So the first, okay, icons as well, right? That's another important part. The first folder you see is called Draggles. Inside that, as I mentioned yesterday, if you all would remember, that you have two kinds of, not two kinds of, you have two layers to a icon, right? So that's your background, and that's your XML code for the background, and then that's your foreground, and that's again your XML code for foreground, right? Okay, I'm going to close that up. Followed by that, you have your layout folder where, excuse me for a second, please. Right. So followed by that, you have your layout folder where you would have something that you would see called an activity underscore main.xml file. This is again, that's the, so if you see this main activity.kotlin file, so whatever you write over here is going to be directly related to whatever you see in activity underscore main.xml, right? I mean, say you okay, I want to remove the button for now. Say you have a text view here, right? This is something you call a text view. I'll come to it in a couple of minutes. So how you wish to manipulate this text view, right? Say you want to print out specific data. That's you can of course type it out here. That's called hard coding. But say you want to print specific type of data, say somebody's name that you pull up from the data they entered, and you want to print it back again. So all of that would be managed at your Kotlin file, and all of that display, a part of a UI, how UI would look, would be managed here in your activity underscore mail.xml. Now, as you add on more activities, so you would see the Kotlin file increasing here, as well as you would see the XML files increasing here, right? They both are mashed up together. Right, moving on to the next folder, you have something called map maps. Now this is again icons, but then you have different pixel density screens, right? So as your pixel density increases, you would also have to match your icons as per that. Otherwise, your icon would just look like a bunch of pixels, whereas your rest of the phone would be, depends on how your screen is, what kind of a screen you have, right? So here you would see this is different kinds of icons, right? You would see that this one is much more clearer than this. So every one of them in a bracket has, mentioned what kind of pixel density it is advisable for. Then a similar set of icons for a round format, right? Because on most phones you would see they have these two app icon shapes is common. And finally, coming on to another important part of the resources folder, this is what we call the values folder. I'm sorry. Here you would have your colors, strings, and themes. So again, if you remember yesterday, I was talking about how you name colors here. You give them a hex code, which is here a code which I would be talking about when I come to something called material design. So you define your hex code of your color, you give your color a name, and then provided you want to use this anywhere in the code, you would just have to use it as say @ color / your color name. And you also see a preview of the color that has been defined. Similarly, you have the same case for strings. You define strings here, and you use them anywhere in the code with the string name. And themes, you will again have two different themes, right? One is for your normal mode, and another one's for your dark mode, right? So here you would see your XML file again, because that's going to be very common for all kinds of UI throughout Android Studio. You would see here that @color purple 500, right? This is what I was talking about. If you go back to your colors.xml, purple 500. So that's how you use a color anywhere in your code. Right. Similarly, color primary, I'm going to talk about all this when I come to material design. But these are all the different colors for your different parts of the app, right? You see here you have an action bar set up. I'm going to talk about all of that a little later in the session. Again, as you're going to see, it's pretty similar file for themes.xml9 because that's just for dark mode. So if you just look at these colors, you would see that the only notable difference would be white being replaced by black, and then that's the basic file set up that way. You can of course change them as per your own preference, right? So that wraps up our values folder. And finally, we come to Gradle. Two kinds of Gradle files. One is your app level Gradle file, and another one is your code level Gradle file, right? Pulling up the code level here, you have all your configurations related to your code in your application. And then this is pretty important. So you would see in many of the code labs, if you progress through the course provided by Google, that do not you would have to include dependencies, but what you read here is you don't include them here. All of those go into the app level Gradle file, which you would see you have your SDK version, you have your target SDK, minimum SDK, all your app configurations that you would need, and here are the dependencies that I was talking about, right? So again, here JVM was how you run your unit tests, right? So that's all you should be concerned about at the moment. Now proceeding ahead with our first app, as I meant. Okay, so at any point of time, you might wanna, close all this down because it's going to get a little bit confusing if you don't. The only things I would suggest you to keep open, it's of course up to you, but the two files that you would need at most points of time, at least at now, would be your Kotlin file and the respective, your UI file. So that would be your layout. Yeah. So these two files you might want to keep open. And right. So as I mentioned, in our first app, we're going to be adding something we call a text view, where we display certain text and we add a button and we're going to change them up, right? So before that, I'm going to be talking a little about views and layouts. So everything you see, okay, firstly, activity, just going to revise that once more. A screen that you see here is called an activity. An activity is what is displayed on, say, you open your app on your phone. So the first screen that you see is called an activity. In fact, other screens, other, say, options in your app can also be called different activities, right? But they depend. So most of the apps would use something that you call fragments, which I'll come towards the end of the session. But for now, you can refer to them as activities. Now, each activity has what we call view and view groups, right? So views are anything that you see inside an activity, say text being displayed, buttons, radio buttons, or checkboxes, anything that you see, images, in fact, even images, anything that you see on your activity is called a view. So if you might have this closed this way, right? So what you would need to do is click on palette to give you the choice of the different types of views that you could add to your app. And you also might want to click on component tree, because that will help you decide what goes behind what, right? If you want to push an image behind all the text, so you would have to put it at the top of the component tree, right? That ways. So when designing an UI, you could either keep it open this way, because this is going to make it easier for all of you to just drag and drop items. But say you want to make changes, you want to change the text, you could of course hard code it, but that's not advisable. I'll come to that in a minute. So what you would need to do for that is you would need to open either code view that gives you only code. Now that's not fun again. So the best alternative would be open up split view, and then you have access to both. Size the screens up as you like. I would like to keep it at something like this, right? That gives me enough access to everything. Now, you would see that this activity has only one view at the moment, which is a text view, right? So before I come to different types of views, we have something called a view group. Or you can also refer to them as layouts, right? So if you click on layouts, you would see the different types of layouts that you have, right? So I'm going to be mentioning a few notable ones that you might end up using most of the times, but there are of course many others. So we've learned what activities are, and now we're proceeding to what layouts are. So the first one that you see here is a constraint layout, and that's what we have here. So if I take you a little bit into the code, you would see constraint layout, right? Anything with Android X in the beginning means it's a part of what you call Jetpack libraries. If you remember that when I opened up Android Studio, I told you that you wouldn't have to check a box which says use legacy Android support libraries because they have been replaced by Jetpack. So yeah, anything starting off with an Android X is a part of Android Jetpack. Now we have a constraint layout, right? So in a constraint layout, as the name goes, you have constraints to put up different views on your screen. So say at the moment I have a constraint layout set up. Now I'm going to add different views, right? If you go on to common, you would see most common views that you would add. So this is your text view, which helps you display text onto the screen. Now, this is of course, you wouldn't want everything to be in the middle, right? You see these lines here, they denote that your view has been constrained to the middle of the screen, right? So if you see in the code here, that describes a text view. So whenever you drag and drop an element, you would see automatically code popping up here. That makes it easy for you all to just add up elements that ways. I would just explain one view, and most of them would have a similar format. So here, the first one is called an ID, right? So say you wanna display text from your Kotlin file, like you wanna display some text that you don't wanna hard code it here. So what you would have to do is you would have to use this specific ID in your Kotlin file. You would have a different command called which I would come later on. But to access this particular view, you need an ID, and that's what you would use. You can name it as as per your preference. I would call it say name, because I would enter my name here later on. Okay, so then you have your layout. Now these are the first three properties are set by default. Right now here you see this is what we call hard coding text into the app interview, right? Because what you define here is what you see over here. You would see hello world, but this is not advisable because two reasons to that, okay? One is if you see most of your apps, at least in Android, would allow you to translate them into other languages. And if you hard code a text, a string into your view this way, what would happen is when you translate, there would either be issues translating, or it wouldn't be translatable altogether. So that's one of the downfalls. And the second thing would be, say you have something called talkback enabled. So again, that again adds up to a translation problem, because when you enable talkback after translating, that again would not be able to read it out, as well as if you have just hard-coded text, say in English, and you're still enabling talkback, that might run into some problems. So again, it's advisable to go on to your values and strings.xml file, and what you would do is say, I have hello world there, right? The text being displayed. So I would go into the strings.xml file, and I would declare a new string that I would say string name equals to display text. And yeah, that's that's the name of your string, which you would use to use it as the ID for getting in onto your app, and as well as you use the same ID in your Kotlin file. Now here you provide the text that you want to display. So I would say hello world, right? And now if you go back to, make sure I save this. Now when you go back to your the main XML file, what you would want to do is, instead of having this, you would say string, right? Not app name, @string slash, what did we call it? We called it display text, right? So you would say display text. Now if apologize for that. Now if you look into this, you would see, you can't see it clearly, I guess, but hello world is being showing up that because that's the content of display text, right? And now, as we are in constraint layout, you would see that these are the constraints. Yeah, this window can also be called a parent window. So these are the 4 constraints, because you see we have 4 different constraints mentioned here. Right now, in a pretty similar manner, I'm going to be adding a button. So you just drag and drop, right? Now you would see an error here because we haven't added constraints to the button. Also, you would see on the left that a code popped up on its own as I dragged and dropped a button. So simply to add up constraints, you would just, do this, right? That's a simpler way of doing it. And say that's the 2 constraints I would want. Also, when you click on the error, Android Studio provides you for an option to fix the error, as you would see here again, hard-coded text, right? So because the text on the button shows up as button, but that's again hard-coded. So you could either go to the strings.xml file and define it yourself. You just click on fix over here and provides a pop-up window for you to just define it that way. And you just click on OK. And you would see it has been replaced by @string/button. So if you go on to your strings.xml file, you would see a new string has been defined, right? Now this similar concept works with colors and themes as well, right? So when we come to colors later on, I wouldn't be taking too much time explaining because it's going to be following the exact same concept. You define colors and you use them anywhere in your code. Okay. Now getting back to this, right. We still seem to have an error. What is that? Okay, we still haven't added constraints on the side. We would have to do that. Right now you would see no errors. And that pretty much adds up the functionality that we spoke about adding. We've added a button and we have a text view. So that's our UI done. Now you might want to just run this and see if your UI looks good enough. So what you would do is you would just click on run. Make sure you have app selected here, right? And click on run, and you would see This is going to be only the UI. Nothing's going to work because we haven't again written the business logic for it. All right, we just have a couple of buttons, and we have one button and one text view set up. So it shouldn't really do anything at the moment, but just to see if it, looks the way it looks here. It's loading. Give it a minute, please. Okay, it's taking a little bit of it. Okay, while that loads, now here you would see that I spoke about only constraint layout, right? So as I said, activity. Inside an activity, you have what you call a view group, a layout. And inside a view group, you would have different views, right? So text view, button, image view, all of that. So now I guess the views are going to be pretty similar because they just drag and drop. So now the different types of layouts that you have, the first one that we spoke about was constraint layout, which is most used because again, you would of course always want something to be displayed under something and beside something. So that's all managed by constraints. Now the other layouts are linear layout, and as the name goes, that would be one below the other linearly, right? You have horizontal as well as vertical. Horizontal would be used in something like a scroll bar where you have multiple images, say in your gallery. If you swipe through images, that isn't an appropriate example, but something like that. Okay, I mean you get the idea of what a horizontal layout might look like, and a vertical one would be again. Think of it as scrolling down multiple images, say scrolling down through a website. Now that again involves something that you call the Recyclerview, because if you just integrate a linear layout, what's going to happen is you're going to take up a lot of resources. If you have anything, a linear or a constraint layout, anything but a recycler view, you're going to take up a lot of resources because scrolling, you're going to have many number of elements one below the other. So what recycler view does is it say you're scrolling through a couple of images. You're in image one at the moment. Once you scroll down to image two, what it does is it recycles the view of image one so that you can use it to view image two. So thereby it recycles every possible view that you see on the screen to save resources in your phone. It might sound like that it's probably not going to affect your phone in any way, but when you have apps that scale up to a large amount of content, say you have single page applications like Instagram that you keep scrolling through and you have multiple views within the app loading. So in those cases, scrolling continually would just take up a lot of resources. So Recyclerview is used vastly in those cases. Right. So we've spoken about constraint layout, linear layout. You also have something called frame layout that you use to integrate Recyclerview into your app, right? And the rest of it wouldn't be of much use. So just revising the names again, we've spoken about what an activity is, spoken about different view groups, and we've spoken about different views. And in the different view groups, the most used one would be constraint layout, but we also know what linear layout is and what Recyclerview is. I would be coming to Recyclerview a little bit later on because we have one app that is a part of your, if you look into the Google course, you would see an app that uses Recyclerview. So it's a pretty good example. So I would be showing that to all of you. Okay, now this app build has run and you would see this is what it looks like. You have your text view and you have your button. Clicking on it does nothing. This does nothing, right? That's your app bar. If you remember in your themes, you had something called an action bar. So say you want to remove that because it does not look that good. So you would have to just do this. No action bar. And if you run the app again, so for running the app, you have a button here, but say you've made changes, so you have to run it again this way, and it's going to take a little while it does that. So once that is done, you would see the action bar on the top is gone. Okay, so now while that runs, we know the basic layout of our app. And now we're going to be going on to building the business logic. So there we go to our Kotlin file. If you're on your project view, you would need to navigate to Java. And there, the first folder, you would see your main activity.kt, which is your Kotlin file. Now, on the top of every Kotlin file, you would see what we call a package name. If you remember in the beginning, I told you shouldn't worry too much about it. So that package name should be included on every Kotlin file that you would see. You have a couple of library imports, right? And then if you remember, I said classes and functions would be something that we use extensively while building apps. So yeah, that's your main activity class. And if you remember yesterday's syntax, we are inheriting from a class called app_compat_activity. What this class does is it allows you to use various of the Android features in your class, right? And it also gives you, I wouldn't call it legacy support, but it gives you enough support depending upon the SDK you've included. Then below that, you would see, if you remember yesterday, in the beginning of the session, I mentioned that you always wouldn't need a main function to say, execute a Kotlin file. So this is what I was meaning at that point of time, that here you would see there's no main function, but our app still runs, right? So that's because of this function called onCreate. So you would also see a keyword override. And if you remember, that's because we have inherited from this class. So this class is probably what you call, not probably, this class is an abstract class, because abstract classes, if you remember, are what we inherit from. And this class has a property defined within it, a function defined within it called onCreate. And as we are calling that function in this specific class called main activity, and we are changing it as per our needs, that's why we are using the concept of overriding, and hence the keyword. And onCreate, the function that helps us to run the Kotlin code without needing to have a main function. And this would come in towards the end of the session. But what you would read and understand from this is, say your app crashes, or say you have sudden change in orientation or something of that sort. So your app's current state gets saved in something you call a bundle, but that isn't the best way to do it. So we'll come to that later, but that's what it typically means. And the super keyword is used to refer to uh, the superclass that is inheriting from. So that in this case is app_compat_activity. And again, calls the onCreate function of that, and saves the state instance. I mean, when it saves the state of the app to that particular parameter. So now you would see set content view r.layout.activity main, right? So as I said, that these two files, the main activity.kotlin file and the activity main_xml, are related. That's because you have this particular line. Now, whatever code you write in this app and you want it to be displayed, I mean, you don't typically display stuff from here, but you can, pull back the variables from there. So say I had these two, right? The text view and the button. So I can pull them back into my main activity. And from here, I can mess up with them and send them back. I mean, so, modify the values, and they'll be displayed accordingly on our UI. So this R is what we call an R class. So whatever resources or whatever you create on your particular app, right? So say colors, strings, be it anything. So everything is a part of this R class. So if I just show you an example, say you would see r.string dot, you can access all the string names, and you say r dot color dot right. So anything that's a part of your app is a part of the R class that gets created with the app, right? So it sets the view to activity main, which is again our activity underscore main.xml file. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna create instances of the button and the text view so that we can meddle around with them here. So if you remember, I said we're going to be using a keyword called late in it to just initialize our variables and then declare our variables and then initialize them later on when we need them inside the app. So I would say late in it, but now you can name it any way you want, but I would call it a button. Equals to, okay, we can't do that here because we're still not inside beyond create, but what we would do is late net var button and then the type, so that's going to be button, right? So as you see that as soon as I press the enter button, you have an import done automatically. So that's again a very good feature of Android Studio. You don't have to do the imports by yourself, it's done automatically. Again, I need to close this, but you would see the top action bar is gone, right? Okay, let me close this up real quick. Okay, now that's our button declared. Now then we have to declare our text view. So late init text view. Now make sure you don't use the exact same text view because that's, you don't use the data type name is what I'm trying to say. So we'll call it text and we would have to call it text view. So you see again an import taking place on the top. So now we have both the components of our app declared declared above. Now what we would do is inside the onCreate function, which gets called only when the app is created in the beginning, we're going to be assigning these initialized button and text views to the actual ones that are present in our activity underscore main.xml. So what we're going to be doing is button equals to the command that we have for finding the elements and popping them up here is called find view by ID. So if you've used JavaScript before, you would know something called get element by ID, get element by class name, all of that, right? So here it's called find view by ID. And you can also specify what exactly you're looking for here, button, right? And then again, in the similar way that you had r.layout.activity main. So we're looking for r dot, what have we called it? We have called it a button. So r dot id dot button. So that now initializes our button with the actual button that we have in our activity underscore main.xml. Similar way for the text view, we're going to be doing text equals to find view by ID. We're going to be having text view r.id.text, if I'm not wrong. Okay, no, we called it name. Okay, close this. Okay. Now that initializes both our button and the text view. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be this is just getting our button or text view into the business logic. Now what we want to do is we want to have an action take place when we click on the button, right? So for that, again, if you've used JavaScript, you would know you have something called on-click listener, just an activity listener, something of that sort, right? So similar fashion, what we have here is a function called set on click listener, which allows us to specify an action to be taken place once we click on a button. So we do button dot set on click listener, right? And then what you would do inside that is so what we want to do is we want to right, we want to change the text, right? Whenever we click on it once or twice. So what we do is text dot how you access the text of any particular element. So your button also has a text part to it, right? So, and also you can't just access the text within a text view by just stating text equals to something, because that is in the format of a string. It is in the format of a button at the moment. So text dot text lets you access the content of a particular the text based content of a particular view. So text dot text equals to I have been clicked, right? And again, you would see hard coding here isn't advisable. So if you hover your mouse over it, so you would go to more actions and extract string resource and resource name. You can say clicked, click, text. And once you do that, that again defines the text in strings.xml. And we would also change the button text to, okay, I would actually use this text for the button, and I would, let's go back there, I would say, change this to text one, and let's say, click me again. As here, I would say, click me, right? So that's that. When you click on the button, what's going to happen is it's going to change your text view to this text. And okay, we want to change that, right? No, we don't want to change that. Okay, 1 second. Okay, let's go back there. Okay, so we want to change that button to this text one. So it's going to be. So now what we've done is we've changed the text on the text view as well as on the button when we click it once, but we didn't want that exactly, right? We wanted to change every time we click. So again, pretty simple programming. You would just do if the number of clicks is odd, you would do something. If it's even, you would do something that way, right? So what you would do is button dot. No, instead of doing it that way. Okay, first let me just run this at least and show you, and then I will get to that. Okay, so running this, take a little bit while it builds up the app. All right, so you see the text click me here, and you see a button. So if you click on it, you would see I have been clicked. Click me again. Now that's what we, I mean, not completely wanted, but that's half of what we wanted, right? You also see the text is really small. So what you'd want to do about that is you could go to your activity underscore mail, and you would see a button here which is called attributes. So once you click on that, you get various options to mess around with regarding any of the views you have. So say I click on, okay, let me minimize, let me go into design view, right? So say I click on this text view, And then I click on attributes, you would see multiple options on how you can change different attributes of the text view. If there's too much going on here, so you could just click on the search button and search for what you're looking for. But you would have pretty common ones up top. So what we would want to say is to change text size to say 34. SP stands for scalable pixels. And then, okay, let's leave the color to that. Make it bold, right? For the button, what you also have is the same set of options, but you would have many other options as well, like rounded corners, button padding, size of the button, color, all of that. So that's again something to look out for if you're looking for customizability. Now, if you run the app again, you would see that it loads up in a pretty legible manner. Give it a minute while it loads up. It says launch run, but the AVD doesn't show up. Give it a minute, please. Okay, loaded up, yeah. So if you click, you would see the exchanges. Now nothing happens when we click again, but we would be looking into that now. So I guess that gives you all a pretty basic knowledge into how you build an app. And also, if you've been building alongside me, congratulations on building your first own app. It's pretty cool. I mean, if you're running it on your smartphone, it's even cooler because you can interact with it by yourself. But again, if you're running it on a virtual device, that's pretty cool as well. And again, if you wish to choose, if you choose to do it later, that's going to be pretty, good experience, I suppose. Yeah, right. So now we'll get to the clicking again part in a couple of minutes. Now, this is your basic app done, right? Now, say you want to install an APK for this. So what you would do is you would head over to build, and you would see build bundle / APKs, and then you would go into build APKs, right? So once you click on that, you would expect a pop-up window sometime soon. If not, because I believe I have a key already provided, so that shouldn't be the case, but still, we'll wait for it to open up. While it opens up, I'll just explain you through the process. Okay, right. So it does it on its own. So what you all would see is a pop-up window on your screen, and that would ask you to enter your name and so there are going to be two parts to it. In the beginning, it's going to be asking you what kind of APK you would need, whether it be a debug APK or whether it be a production-based APK. So you would, of course, select the first one, not the debug one, the production-based APK. And then it would proceed to asking you your name and will ask you to enter your password. That's to create a virtual signature for you so that when you publish it in Play Store, it matches up to their regulations. And also, it's going to be asking you to enter your first name and last name for a certificate. Once you do that, it's going to be taking a little while it builds up your APK, and it's going to be storing it into a folder. Now, you could, of course, navigate to that folder by searching the folder, but if you look into something called event log over here, you would see this is basically for everything, not just this, right? You would see all information about what's going on here. Event log. So you would see here that build APK is done. Now, if you click on locate, it's going to be opening up a folder where exactly your APK is stored. And that is what your file should look like. Now, if you just transfer this on So you're not running your app in a smartphone. Just transfer this APK to your device. You're going to be asked to a couple of warnings saying it might be a virus or whatever of that sort, and you would just have to pass through all of those, and then you would be able to install your app on your smartphone. So that's how an APK is created, right? Okay, that does this for now. Now I would love to add the feature about where you would click the button and it would again show you the different text, but I am afraid I'm going to end up in the same situation as yesterday, not being able to cover half the concept. So I would leave this at this. What you all can do is you can add any number of buttons or text view images to your apps. I'm just going to show you a default image just to show you how you put an image behind the text. Okay, so what you would do is you would go to your activity underscore main at XML, you would go to common, you would select image view, you would drop it here. Now again, we're gonna just pick up something that's already present. Okay, that looks pretty terrible. Never mind, I would stick with this. Right. So now again, as it is a constraint layout, you would need to constraint all. Okay, I did not want to do that. You would have to constrain it to so all the four corners, and that probably does it. Now say you want to increase the size, right? So this is the case where your photo covers the app, your text. So you would see on your component tree, if you move your image to the top, your text comes on top of the image. Now if I just run this for you, okay, you can look up what the warning is. Okay, this shouldn't be bothering us at the moment. Can just ignore. Now that again is a pretty important part, but pretty important in the sense in terms of accessibility, you would have to, of course, include contact descriptions for images. But yeah, we're gonna leave it for now and just gonna run the app once more to show you what that looks like. Right? So I'm not sure if that's a placeholder and an image. 1 second. Okay, what I'm going to do is, I think that's probably a placeholder for an image, not an image actually. I'm going to load up an image from my system and just add in there. If you see here, okay, let me just show you how you add an image to your resource manager. So what you do is you click on resource manager here, you click on plus, you have different options. Vector asset is again for SVGs, which are scalable vector graphics, which you would add such that, say, your device size changes, the image can scale itself and your quality wouldn't be lost. As an image asset is your, normal JPG or PNG, whatever of that sort, right? You would see it presumes you're adding an icon by default, but we're going to be proceeding ahead. Yeah, here you would see the type of file that you're adding and what kind of density and all of that, right? If you click on, okay, 1 second, sorry. Okay, that was adding an image from, say, what you've already imported, right? It's not technically what we wanted to do, but you would have to import drivers to add images from your PC. Say I do anything, Kotlin icon. Okay, next, let's you select that, import it. That's your icon. That's your image. And what you do is minimize this. And you go to attributes. You look up where your image is. It can be pretty hard to find sometimes. Never mind. What we can do is we're just going to add it that way. Okay, give me a second, please, while I add the image into this app. While that's done, I would also give you guys a look into what's been happening with the log while I add the image into this app. I'm going to design and right, so when I talk about the image, while adding the image, we're going to be having a look at what the logcat is. So as I was mentioning yesterday, if you remember, a logcat is typically, we were talking that I wouldn't be using the typical debugger that you have in Android Studio to debug code, because that's pretty, it's of course very useful, but it's pretty extensive. So what we're going to be using instead is our logcat window, which lets us add logs as in different functions as we progress. And so what you would see here is different logs from when we've been running the app. So it comes, this is system generated logs, right? But you can of course add in your own logs here. And then every log has its particular, what do you call, a log ID and a log message. So you have many logs coming up in Android apps. So what you would do is you would use your log. It's not typically called an ID, but you can refer to it as an ID to find what kind of logs you're looking for, and that will probably lead you to what error you had. So that's that's what you call debugging, right? It's a good way to add logs to each and every function to figure out where your error has taken place and how you can go about fixing that specific error, all of that, right? So if you go through the logcat here, there isn't something specifically large enough going on to show you. Okay, I think this would be a good enough view. Yeah. So you would see here there's a huge amount of logs, right? So each one has a specific set of messages, and it's going to be telling you what's happening. So if you here, you're going to be searching for the different IDs you've provided for your log, and that way you'll be able to, find the specific log that you were looking for, right? So, okay, I'm going to come back to this again while I do this. Okay, then you've pretty much built your first app, right? The image part, I'm not sure what I'm going wrong with because it's supposed to add in the image on its own. But yeah, I'll come back to that in a minute. In a couple of minutes, right? But still, congratulations on building your first app, if you've done that with me or whatever be it. And now I'm going to be taking you through a couple of more concepts before we go on a break. And we'll come back and explore a few other really interesting topics. I'm going to be pulling up the PPT again. Sorry for that. Yeah. So technically have built our first app. I'll get back to the image. Don't know why it's doing that, but I'll definitely show you once we're back from the break. And also, okay, that's done. Now moving ahead to the next. Yeah, we're done with this. So that crosses off another one of the to-do items on our list. And then we finally, apologize for the background noise again. Okay, so we proceed ahead to the next. If you remember what I was talking about yesterday, that we have a couple of sample apps provided by Google, right? So what Google has done is, if you've looked through the course, you would have seen that they've provided in the code labs many sample apps for all of us to, either you can choose what they call starter apps to just have the starter code and then code it out yourself, or what you can also have is the complete solution of an app. So all of that is included in a GitHub repo. I'm just going to pull up the repo 1 second. So that's the GitHub repo that you would see all the apps that they have in. This has literally everything that you see in the Colabs. As I said, you have two different folders, right? So this repositories, I mean, sorry. So the first one is for your entire app solutions, where these are the starter apps that let you can proceed ahead with the starter code, and then you code out whatever you learn on a specific unit, and that helps you develop your entire app. So I would be sending out these PPTs, I think, at the end of either today's session or tomorrow, so you could pretty much figure out what's what. Getting back to the presentation, right? So yeah, that's the GitHub repos that you would have. And two other concepts before we go on a break. Testing, right? So as I mentioned in the beginning, you have as your app scale up, you would need to write tests because you can't possibly test out each and every functionality. I mean, you would still need user-based tests because that's of course going to give you a real feedback. But if you remember what I mentioned in the beginning, you have two different types of tests. They help us determine if our apps, our functions are running properly. So I'm gonna quickly pull up Android Studio and open up a test to just show you how they run. Again, you would see if you look through the Android course that every unit has tests, right? I mean, they would ask you to write your own implementation tests or your own unit tests. Now, I wouldn't focus too much on that because I don't believe that's pretty important at this point, because that's going to be very specific to what your app would need, right? So me or now, of course, Google is doing it because they have provided you with a specific set of apps. But me going out and teaching this specifically wouldn't make a lot of sense to you at this point. So I'm just going to show you how you run these tests. And if you would like to know more, I guess Google again provides you pretty specific content related to the apps they provide. So again, I think knowing what the test does and different types of tests is pretty enough at this point of time. So if you see these buttons, once you click on them, you would have your test run. Now this is again an instrumentation test, so that runs on a device. Right. Yeah, okay, that's happening because we have multiple. If you remember, in the drawable, sorry, in the maps folder, we have multiple icons, right? So this test was built to show you that test does fail. And this was supposed to run on your Android virtual device, but it didn't even navigate there because you had your test failing at the first run instance. So it didn't really need to propagate there. Now looking at the other type of test that we have, which are unit tests. So this is going to be running on your JVM, so that does not need any kind of Android virtual device to be running. So if you just click on the run, you would have your logcat open up. I mean, all your log entries would be building up on the go. So you would see your unit test. The build fails for the previous test, right? The unit test passed because it would because what you're doing is you're doing a set. Okay, so unit tests have a couple of different functions like these. Like if you see here, it's pretty understandable, right? You're checking if 2 plus 2 equals to 4. So if assert equals is in function, you have various other functions like assert not equals, assert true, assert false, assert null, that way, right? So if I use the same set of code with assert not equals, again, camel case there. So if I run this now, it should say Test failed for the second one. Right, because 4, 2 plus 2 is of course 4, so that would, so that's how you run, write code for unit tests. But again, as I mentioned, not that important at this point of time. Finally, the last concept before I let you all go on a little break would be debugging, as I was talking about it a little while back. So testing is done. Now, again, so the extensive debugger lets you set typically what you call breakpoints. So even after, say, your app crashes, you can continue your execution in the form of a debugger and see what's happened where and how you would like to change it up. So instead of using the typical debugger that we have in Android Studio, we're going to be using logcat, as I mentioned. So I'm going to quickly show you how to create log. Let's head over to function. Okay, maybe here, right? So let me put it inside down click listener. So whenever a button is clicked, we're going to be having a log entry saying that the button was clicked. So what we need for that is we have a command in Kotlin which allows you to create logs. Right, so I'm just gonna that down. 1 second, please. Not sure what's happening. The screen doesn't seem to respond. Please give me a second. Okay, yeah, that's what happens when you run too many things together. Apologize for that. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a log. So what you use to create log messages is log dot, and then you have different options. Okay, you can either have errors, you can have debug messages, you can have information, you can have warnings, all of that created through a log. But what we would do is log.i, log.i, because you're printing out information. And then what we have is two parameters in this function. The first one being the tag, which you use to find out what kind of log you wrote. And the second one is a message. So say I type in Android study jams, and the second one would be the button was clicked. I would still see an error because we haven't imported logs. So once you have these kind of errors, you just hover over what's showing up in red and you just click on import. And it's gonna, if you go ahead, you see logs utilities have been imported. Now let me build the app again. Right. Once we build the app again, if we click a button, I'm gonna keep logcat open. Right, I'm gonna wait for a little bit for it to load. Okay, it's taking. That's weird. Oh, sorry, I never ran the app. Yeah, never mind. Okay, it's gonna take a little bit of a while. Right, so when we click on the app, it should generate a log message which says the button was clicked. And so we've clicked the button, right? Now you want to go into logcat and search by ASG. Quite sure what's going on. 1 second, please. Okay, that's a little weird. Okay, yeah, my bad. So you select what kind of log you've been passed, and okay, that app isn't here. still running the test for some reason, and that's very weird. Okay. I see. Okay, what I did in the beginning was I created a duplicate resource for this. I would have to go over and delete this. Right, a second. Okay, we need to head over to where we have our bitmaps. That would be here. And we would see a duplicate created, I believe. Okay, I don't see any duplicate. That's a little weird. Do we see anything here? Okay. Maybe we'll head on to Source Manager and we'll delete this. Right, let's see if it works now. Okay, that's okay. Maybe that's because of the resource that I created, and I'm not able to find where that is. I'll get back to logs once all of you are back from the break. I'll make sure I show you what logs are like and how we'll be using them. We'll have a quick break for about, I guess, say till 7, where you guys can take a quick little break while I fix these issues. And please keep asking any doubts if you do have them. Right, so I think good enough for a quick break. All right, welcome back, everybody. Um, I hope you had a pretty decent break. Um, we'll just look into the chat if you have any questions. Okay. Um, Thank you for person who pointed out looking forward to today's session. That's very sweet of you. And also, Aditya, thanks for that. Yeah, you tap on build number a couple of times to get your developer options. So I see no questions. Does that mean you're not able to understand anything? Or does it mean I'm going either too fast, too slow? Feel free to type out anything in the chat if you're listening. If not, I can carry ahead in the same pace. Wait for about a minute or so to hear any questions. If not, feel free to roll them out at any point and I'll be answering them at the end of the session, or even feel free to ask us in the Discord channel and anytime after the session, and I'll get back. Okay. Right, I don't see any questions, so I guess that's going good or bad. Either ways, let me carry on because we don't have too much time left. Right, so getting on with the app. Gonna, sorry, just a second. Yeah, so we're gonna run the app. Right, just a couple of small mistakes that I had made while importing the image. I forgot to share my screen. Give me a minute. Okay, I am sharing my screen. Never mind. Right. Okay, getting back to the app. Right. So, okay, that's not the app. That's something else. Here we have an app which you click. Okay, now if you would go into Logcat and you search info, because I will specify with the log.i, and you look up ASJ, you would see a logcat message at this point of time, which specifies the button was clicked. Now, say I put out this message outside the function, just under the onCreate. This is to specify and just to show you that when does the onCreate the function actually get called. We'll actually look into this a little deeper when we get to activity lifecycle. But okay, so when we run this again, you would see on, okay, let me have two logcat messages, so that would be better. That, yep, let's do this. So let's do that. And this is pulling up the logcat from the previous one, I believe. Wait, let me open up the app real quick. Right. So when we let me run that again in a second. So if you see that's an app, we'll hit ASJ, you'll see only onCreate was called. Now when we click on the button, we would say the button was clicked. So then in this is a pretty simple example, but in this fashion, you would be able to pretty quickly, figure out where and what went wrong. So that's pretty much about debugging. It's of course used in a very different way depending on what your use case is. But at the moment, I believe this would be more than enough for you all to learn. Getting back to the PPT. Okay. right? Okay, I think I missed out a couple of slides before this, before I get the navigation. A second, right, I did miss out a couple of slides. Okay. Now again, um, 1 second. Right. So accepting input from the user is a pretty important part in an app because most of the social media apps, at least, that's how they work, right? You type in messages and then your message is stored, passed through a server and reach the destination. So that's how they work. And accepting user input would be pretty important for an app to run, right? So you have, like you had different views in your app, you have again a few other views that help you accept input from the user in different terms, right? So you have, if you look at this is what you call edit text that lets you accept user input. It's going to be a similar fashion, like you just drag and drop edit text into your activity, and then you can again take it back to your business logic and you manipulate it there. Similarly, you have something called a radio button, right? So now the difference between a radio button and a checkbox would be, say you have multiple checkboxes and you can select all of them. So that's like more of a more than one correct answer kind of a thing. Whereas on a radio button, you have only one correct option, or what I would trying to indicate by that is you can only select one button. So that's why you would have to include a set of radio buttons in what you call a radio group. Now, both of them are again, addable the same way you add um, elements into, like same way you add in different views, you add in a radio group and radio button. Now, again, you see in the end what we call a switch or a toggle switch, right? And finally, this is an app that this is a screenshot that I picked up from the Google course. And this is if you look through the course, you'll find this as a tip calculator app, and this is what you build, I believe, in the second unit. So if I just show you how you add in these elements to your app, right? So let me just bring you back here. Activity main XML, right? So what you would need to do is, let me just go into design view, decrease the size a little bit. Now, if you see here, if you go to text, it's referred to as plain text here, but that is what you call an edit text ideally, because when you look into the XML part, it's going to be showing up as an edit text. Now you have different formats, right? The password, email. What all of these use is something called regular expressions, or regex. So basically, you have different formats, right? You can't have password say greater than, less than 8 characters, or say email would have to specify a specific format. So for all of those, you use something called regular expressions, and I think you would be learning that in your third semester. So this has all of that built in already. So you just drag and drop. So it's going to show you edit text. So that's your edit text again. Adding it in a constraint view would mean you specify constraints, right? Not going to be showing you the entire functionality, because if I'm going to do that, I won't be able to cover the concepts. So that's your edit text. Similar way, you have buttons, right? So that's it. So you see something called a radio group. So to add a radio group, I think the best way to do it would be via code, because first you have to specify a radio group, and then inside that radio buttons. Similar way, you have a switch. Just drag and drop a switch. Right, so that's what it's going to look like. Similarly, you have various other options, right? I think these all would be something out of the scope at the point. But yeah, so that's how you accept input from the user. Now, what you do is, like you had in your business logic, like you had the text, the text attribute for this particular text view. Similarly, for the edit text or whatever, the buttons and the radio buttons, you would have similar attributes. So for, at least like for edit text, it's called text again. So you would do whatever you name your edit text here, you would do that dot text to gain all the text entered by the user, and you would manipulate it as you want, right? You would depends on what you're accepting from the user. So that's that, and then I would just show you what the XML file looks like after you add it. So you would see edit text again. Your hard-coded strings show up as warnings. So that's your text input from the user. This is your toggle switch from the user, right? So that's going to be basically about user input. It's not going to be too hard to implement. So I guess a little bit looking through the course, I think that would be necessary at all. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple too, similar to what you did while adding in different views. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up inputs, accepting inputs from the user for now. Now we would move ahead to the next one, which is called material design. So this is pretty interesting, okay? If you all use Android devices, or if you've heard of what current version on Android is running, so that'd be Android 12. Now, material design has been around for several years. Okay, it's been what Google's been using to specify a specific set of rules that developers should follow to add in design elements to their apps. So no, it's not only a specific set of rules, okay? I mean, it of course does have the specific set of rules, but it also provides you with various other components that help you directly integrate them into your app without having to take care of them yourselves. I mean, if you had to like create specific color themed underlines for every color, that would be, a lot of headaches. So along with the rules, they also give you a specific set of components that you directly import, and you can use them in your app. They call material components. And if you just open up a browser, io/design, you would see a pretty aesthetic looking site where you would find all different material UI resources. What Android 12 has come up with is called Material U. If you heard of that, I think many of you would. So Material U, what it does is it changes the entire theme of your smartphone based on this, the wallpaper or the color theming that you choose. So say you have a greenish kind of a wallpaper, so everything, say from your contacts apps to your buttons and your UI elements, your um, the quick navigation bar or your quick toggle options that you drop in, everything changes as per that theme. So all of that is done through material. No, yeah, this is what I was talking about, right? You see that everything is themed in a pretty neat way, I think. You can explore this site. It looks pretty cool. It can also give you insights into what you should follow while developing apps and how you should theme them and all of that, right? So now, talking of material design, you would see that these are the components that I was mentioning. So you'd see an apps bar. This is called the bottom bar. You have a top bar. This is a backdrop. All these are mentioned on the site already. So all of that is going to be themed as per what you choose, what the user chooses, in fact, starting off Android 12. And it's going to be pretty easy to implement because they already provide you with those components. And all you would have to do is import and use them in the right way. I'm going to be also showing you a little design components within our Android app. So if you just head over to the app, talked about this a little while ago. If you look into your themes, right? So all your, these color codings come by default, right? So they're based on a pretty standard theme, but they have an all starter Android apps, right? You can change these themes as per your choice by adding colors to your colors.xml and then changing them up here. Now you would see color primary variant, all of that. There's a lot of colors going on here, right? So to help you decide all of that, and there's something pretty cool that I found. It's called color tool, okay? So it's again a part of material IOs. That is not how it's supposed to look like. Okay, that's definitely not what's supposed to happen. 1 second. Yeah, so that is what the site should look like. Here you have a couple of, a huge variety of colors that you can choose from. Now you would see, say, I choose green, just for the sake of it. Maybe this. So it automatically gives you shades of that color on your primary. It kind of shows you what's going to be looking like on your phone screen. I choose a secondary color. I think white-ish would look good. So that, it also gives you the hex codes, right? So hex code is a hexagonal code that's followed throughout all kinds of UI design, right? So what you would see on a normal hex code is either 6 or 8 digits. Now, if you okay, I think all of you might know this, but RGB, right? So red, green, blue. That's how colors work. So first, if you see this particular hex code, if you look at the first two numbers, that's for, the first two numbers, 55, that's for the amount of red you have in. 8B is the amount of green, and then 2F is for blue. So they specify how much amount of what color you have to blend in from colors. RGB again is red, green, blue, and then this is a 6-digit hex color code. Sometimes you have 8, where the first 2 digits before RGB would specify the transparency of that color. So this again is going to be used when you think of designing apps, right? Now, you wouldn't need to bother too much about hex codes, but just to know what hex code looks like and what it denotes. It ranges, every color's range ranges from 0 to F being full, and 0 being, like you would have numbers from 0 to 8, and then you have A, B, C, D, E, F. That's how hex works. That's a specific type of, I would say, a format where you have only specific digits allowed. So that'd be from 0 to 8 and A to F. So okay, that's I think that's enough for colors and hex codes. But what you would also have is design sites, platforms, or I would say applications that most of you might have heard of. If not, that's called Figma. So this is what you use to, say, prototype your applications. So before you, want to get started with an application, you might want to design a pretty basic layout for the UI. So you do that on Figma, or you have something called Adobe XD, right? So these are pretty useful applications. Again, Adobe XD is going to be, I think it's paid because, okay, yeah, it is paid because it's Adobe. So Figma is pretty cool. And also, as you develop UI, it also builds up code in the backend, which you can copy and paste to use as UI directly. And also a little more insight into what you can use to design is you have these specific sites that I found. Okay, I think it's pretty useful. One's called the Noun Project. That gives you access to all kinds of icons and everything. If you need to have an account to download, you get access to either in the form of SVGs or in the form of whatever picture format you like. You also have another set of sites. Another one is called Undraw. So that gives you pretty cool looking graphics based on what hex code you enter. So what you would need to do is just enter a hex code here. Based on that, you would have many cool graphics. That's not it. You would have to just search for whatever you feel like. So that is pretty cool, I believe, and you can use this to build, add an images to your apps and all of that. Again, pretty useful resources. Right. So now getting back to our presentation. Right, so that does it with material design, and this is what I was talking of. It's called Recyclerview. As I said, Recyclerview is used extensively when you have too much scrolling taking place on your screen, and you don't want to use those efficient enough resources on your smartphone to bottleneck up itself and not be able to perform other tasks. Whereas what powerful phones would undergo is if you have too much to scroll, it would cause in breaks or gaps in your UI. It wouldn't create a pretty neat looking experience for the user. So that's why you have something called Recycler View, which has your different items stacked up together. Like that's your, the different, say, images you're displaying on your screen. And you have an adapter. That's again, you write a Kotlin class file for it. I would show you an example of an already built app by Google to show you how Recycler View looks like. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you would use frame layout to use Recycler View. And if you read through this piece of text, you see if it improves performance by improving responsiveness, and thereby it won't slow down your phone. So if I quickly pull up an app, again, you can download all of this from the GitHub repo. So this, I believe, is called Affirmations. Yeah, that one. Right. So what this app basically has is a couple of pictures lined up together. One below the other. Use Recycler View. So if you look here into the project folder, you would see pretty normal stuff, but here you would see an extra couple of folders in your first package folder where you would typically have only main one. You're used to only seeing one main activity file at this point of time, but you would of course see three other folders. Uh, Model isn't something you should look into right now. I'll come to that probably in tomorrow's session, but because I don't have time for that right now. Again, so the only thing worth looking is right now is your adapter, because that's what helps you get through your Recycler view. Before getting to this, I'll just show you the XML file here. Again, this is by Google. They have all of their copyrights and everything mentioned. So yeah, you would see a frame layer because that's used to implement Recyclerview. Inside that, you have your Recyclerview setup, where again we're using, I believe, using Constraint Layout. Okay, I'm sorry, using a frame layout. You can also have a frame layout inside an activity. So that's what I was probably referring to. But yeah, so of course, using a frame layout, and you have a recycler view inside it. Now moving on to the adapter. So as I mentioned, you would have an adapter Kotlin file, which helps you. What the adapter basically does, it helps you, recycle the views. So once you're scrolled through a view already, it uses the previous view resources and provides them to the next upcoming view. And that way it reuses the resources rather than assigning resources for every couple of scrolls that you perform. Now, all of this code would be taking a large amount of time to explain. That's why I just wanted to show you what an app with Recycler View would contain. Again, I would be rushing a little bit, because if you actually go through the course yourself, right, you would see that the amount of content is so vast that it's impossible to cover in 3 days. I'm trying to fit in most of what's important, but there is so much of examples and so much of explanation that you would need to give yourself, I say, a couple of weeks to get accustomed with everything. But whatever is important, whatever is needed to get your basics right, whatever is needed to keep you interested in the sessions, I'm going to be talking about all of that. So don't feel like you're missing out on anything if you're not going to be looking into the codes by Google. because I assume, I'm going to have all the basics covered. But do look into that course definitely when you have time, because it gives you a vast amount of examples. Right, so here you would see you have your Recyclerview adapter. Kotlin code again pretty readable. Now here you have a class. Again, the adapter, you have a class inside a class. So what you do inside the class here is you declare your various views that you would be presenting in each scroll, right? So here we have, let me show you the app so that'll help you understand. We have one image and one text for each view. So you have like one image, and below that you have like a quote or something of that sort. So those are the things that we're going to be having for each particular view, and that's going to be recycled by our Recyclerview adapter. And now you would see these are the functions that are overridden because we have been inheriting from a class that is called our Recyclerview adapter. So again, you would see a couple of overridden functions here. You would see you have these are different parts of a life cycle, right? You would create a view, and then you would bind the view to the screen, and after the view, on different life cycles, like when we move ahead to and reach to activity life cycles, you would see that activity is created and it's paused at times when you do certain actions. It's again resumed, but the activity gets destroyed after a point of time. But even this does get destroyed, but at the moment you wouldn't see that because we're recycling the different views, right? So destroy would be possibly done in any of the other folders because we're not technically doing that in this, because this is the adapter file. You would see destroy function probably in main activity. So here you would see only three overridden functions. Again, overriding is done when you inherit. So you create the view, you bind the view to the screen, and then you keep recycling the view. This is again related to data. I wouldn't be covering this right now, but I'll get to this soon enough tomorrow, I believe. So if I show you the app, yeah, that's what it is. Each view consists of one image and a piece of text. If you scroll through, you probably won't understand any difference because the app isn't big enough, but it's recycling each and every view. So say I'm scrolling up this view, now the view that just got covered, the resources provided to that view are being recycled and provided to the next view that's going to be coming up. So now the same process is going to be going on as we scroll. Once the app is closed, that's when we stop our recycling and all the resources are sent back to the phone's processor. So that's a pretty broad overview on what Recyclerview is. Okay, I think that pretty much covers Recyclerview. Getting back to the PPT. I don't think I have too much of time, so I would be covering only one more concept. Okay, this is a few good coding practices. As I mentioned at the beginning, hard code strings should be avoided because I gave you two reasons for that. One would be translations. Another would be a talkback after translations as well as before translations. Code should be short and concise. Now that's followed for possibly every language. Say you're writing some code where you return a variable. So instead of say not return a variable, say returning a value of an operation. So instead of having to create a variable and store the result of that result of that operation into that variable and return that, what you should technically do is just return the result of the operation directly, right? This is a pretty small example, so you should just keep it concise as you can. Also, you would need to maintain a standard formatting throughout the code. It's not like Python where you would have to, but of course, neat code looks pretty readable, and it also helps you understand what's happening where. So, like if you have different spaces and different blocks wherever you need them, that'll help you group the code and find out what's happening where. And also, you would the last point probably won't hit you that much at this point of time, but what you would see is if you saw, okay, let me pull up that app. If you saw here that we have a package, this is the package, right? So you would need to have different packages for different parts of your code. Say A part of your app is connecting to the internet and getting data. So you would assign a package to that job solely. Say you have a UI running. So again, that is handled by this package here. Say you have database operations going on. You would have another package for that. So it's good to create packages for different operations to, segregate tasks. That's exactly not the idea of a package, but at this point, I think that should be enough to understand. And also, I guess, okay, that pretty much wraps up the coding practices. Now, I would just start off with one concept, which I would be continuing in tomorrow's session. So now you already saw that we built an app, right? Where we have only one screen, which we call an activity. We had only one activity. But of course, most of the apps don't have one activity, they have many. So adding multiple activities is a pretty simple process, but what you would want to focus on more is how you navigate between them, right? So again, Android Jetpack has its own set of navigation libraries that make it really easy for you to navigate. Create navigation links between the apps that I'll get to tomorrow. It's going to take a little of time, so I'm going to start that now. But on a normal note, how you create an activity, how you create a link between different activities is through something that you call an intent. So, what an intent does is, say you have a button in a particular activity, and all you would need to do is um, you would have to create an intent and that points to a specific activity within your app. And all you would have to do is you have to show that intent once your button is clicked, right? So that's pretty simple, a pretty simple way to display multiple activities and navigate between them. Now you can of course add in navigation gestures between the different activities, but that's going to be a little tough to do with intents. But as I mentioned, Jetpack makes it really easy to do that. So as of now, we're going to just be talking about basic navigation between activities. I'm going to take up about say 5 more minutes, and then we can end today's session. So yeah, so you can see on the screen here, when you open up Android Studio for the, like when you open up a new project in Android Studio, you would also see these options among the different starter options that you would have, something called a bottom navigation activity. So if you want to like explore what an activity or how navigation takes place between activities, you just might want to go and hit on create a new bottom navigation activity. Or you also have something called a navigation drawer, which pulls up from the side upon clicking a button or swiping. So if you just want to explore before we hit on tomorrow's session, you can do that by looking into, when you create these and just look into the code and what's happening. If you just want to explore, but I'm going to explain it to you all tomorrow anyways. And this is what I was talking about, intents. I'm not going to get into the code today, but I'm going to do that tomorrow. So what intents help you do is help you create links to different activities within your app. Uh, Two different types of intents, as you see on the screen already. You have an implicit intent and an explicit intent. Explicit is what you use in your app normally. So say your app has 5 screens, you use intents to navigate between those 5 screens. So you would say from screen 1 to screen 2, you have an intent. From screen 1 to screen 3, you have an intent, that way, right? So you have predefined activities and you navigate to them via explicit intents. Whereas in implicit intents, I think you've pretty much, all of you would have noticed that when you click on links within certain apps, or where you click on the share button, you have these certain windows, I wouldn't say popping up, but sliding up from your bottom of the screen. So these are called implicit intents, right? Now what these do is, as I said, system features, doesn't have to be always. I mean, all of you might think that implicit intents are pretty simple, right? Because what you would just do is you would just add a, like you have predefined code where you would just say that on clicking a link, you open up this browser, and clicking the share button, you open up this. But it's not that simple because, say, I'm a user who does not use Google Chrome. I use Edge as my default browser. So I would have to take account of that I need to account for opening the link on the specific user's default browser, or say I use a different navigation app, not Google Maps, say I use something else. So I have to take care of that again. Now, say I have specific options turned on, like maybe I have my say I don't have an email signed in to my Gmail account. I mean, the Gmail app, but I have it signed down on an Outlook app. So yeah, you get that, right? I mean, getting implicit intents is equally as important as getting explicit intents, because you don't want the user to just click on the link and it opens up something that the user does not expect, or it doesn't open up at all because that app does not exist on the phone. So it's pretty important part. We'll be getting on to how you connect different activities using intents tomorrow. And tomorrow is also going to be a pretty interesting session, because we'll be talking about Jetpack that offers you a vast source of capabilities as to how you can navigate between apps, as to how you can create architectures. Like you separate the data for your app, you separate the UI within the same app so that your data stays safe. Then you also have libraries that help you connect to the internet and help you download images or data from a server. That's how the most typical example would be a weather app, right? That's how they work. They connect because the apps that you would see that we talked about till now didn't have any kind of internet connection facilities, right? So that's an important part again. Then we would also talk about how you create background activities for your app, right? Because you don't want everything happening in the foreground. You want to create something called threads that help you run actions in the background, so that whatever is happening in the foreground does not get affected by the plethora of tasks going on in the background. So we have a couple of interesting and I would say a little more difficult than what's been going on, but it's again pretty interesting. I think I would end the session at this today. I'm open to any sort of questions you all might have at this point. I'm sorry that I extended it a little bit. And yet again, I wasn't able to finish what I planned, but don't worry. I mean, the entire course that I have planned for this set of 3 days, I assure you I'll be covering all of that. And you would have, I assume, if I'm being clear, then all of you would have pretty good basic knowledge about Android app development, and you would be able to, you know, build up apps the way you like. Uh, Open to any questions you might all have. Firstly, I would like to thank Kunal, Aditya. That's great. I'm happy all of you are, uh, you know, coping up and understanding means a lot. Also, Aditya, yes, I would be. In fact, I have a. If you saw that folder that I had, there are various other links that I used to, build these PPTs up and all that. So I think I would share that entire bookmarks folder with all of you. I think I'll probably have to ask somebody from the team to do it, but I'll make sure you all get those links. You'll have it at the earliest. Any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll wait for a couple of minutes. If not, you can again reach out to us on the Discord server, and at any point of time after the session, and we'll try our best to answer to you as fast as possible. Any questions? I'll wait for about a minute or more. If no questions, we'll wrap up for the day. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It's been a great session. I know it's going to be a lot to take in one session, but I hope you guys are at least understanding a little bit. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. Great to have all of you. Thank you. Uh, okay. Yeah, Samad. I mean, you would have to get an extension on Figma. Uh, Not sure if I said automatically in the session. I'm sorry if I did that, but it's probably my nose. Anyways, but yeah, yeah, you would have to get an extension on Figma. I'll add that to the set of links that I reach out to all of you. So you'll be able to do it with that. Hope that answered your question. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening.